for now. 5-10-4.
Nobody can stop me.
You know how fast you were going?
When you see somebody stop me, stopping my takedowns, bro,
License and registration.
it's not possible, bro.
There's a certain something about UFC fighter Khamzat Chimaev. Call it charisma or just plain old mystique. He exploded onto the MMA scene like an atomic bomb, seemingly out of nowhere and destroying everything in sight. And that unstoppable juggernaut aura made me very curious about his life. Seriously, where did this guy come from? I looked into it, and well, if you were expecting the story to be normal, let's just say you're in for a disappointment. My name is Greg, and welcome back to GK. Now, before we get started today, I just want to address the elephant in the room. There's something different about me, right? The new mustache, the new hair. I remind you of somebody. Let's be honest, I mean, there's no two ways about it. I look famous, huh? You're jealous. I know. It's cool. It's natural. It's natural. Now, let's get into what we all came here to get into too. Most of you are familiar with Khamzat Chimaev's work inside of the octagon, but today we'll be talking about his life outside of it. We'll be covering his run-ins with the law, his controversial relationship with Chechen President Ramzan Kadyrov, his street fights, his beef with Khabib, and even how he got his famous scar. Before we get started, a disclaimer: the information that follows is taken from several articles and interviews in both American and Russian media. Some of it is taken from direct quotes from Khamzat himself, and some of it is speculations and opinions of the authors. In no way will I be attacking Khamzat personally. I will simply be relaying the available information. It's up to you as the viewer to form your own opinions. And if this type of content is of interest to you, then consider subscribing. We've been growing very quickly lately and would be absolutely ecstatic to have you join in. And with that said, I know what you're here for, so let's just get into it. Khamzat Hazarovich Chimaev was born on May 1st of 1994 in a Chechen village by the name of Gardeyskaya, roughly translated to the place of the guards, named after the World War II Russian army guards who resisted German forces from August of 1942 to January of 1943. Contrary to some assumptions, he was not born with a cleft lip. His scar came as a result of him falling down the cement stairs in his family's house at the age of 2. In addition to the lip injury, he also suffered a deviated septum and knocked out the top row of his teeth. Fortunately for his future smile, they were only baby teeth. He began wrestling at the age of 5 and showed extreme promise, competing over several different weight classes and eventually winning a bronze medal in the junior division of the Russian National Championships. By North American and European standards, Chechnya is a relatively confrontational place. Street fights are the norm, not the exception, and according to Khamzat, his childhood was full of them. On one occasion, when he was between 14 and 15 years old, he recalled visiting his grandmother's village and getting into it with some older boys in the neighborhood. After a brief one-on-one, they jumped him and beat him over the head with some empty glass lemonade bottles that were standing out in front of his grandmother's house. According to him, over the course of the following year, he took revenge on several members of the group, but wasn't able to hunt them all down. All in all, he remembers the incident fondly, just a normal part of his childhood, calling it funny. In 2013, when he was 19 years old, he moved to Sweden and eventually began to train at the All-Stars Training Center with Alexander Gustafsson, Ilir Latifi, and several other established MMA fighters. The story is a bit open to interpretation here. According to several sources online and to Khabib Nurmagomedov's cousin, which we'll be getting to in a second, Khamzat immigrated based on political asylum. In other words, as a refugee. According to Khamzat himself, however, he came to Sweden with his family in order for one of his brothers to get a necessary surgery on his back, not trusting the medicine in Chechnya, a claim that would later prove to be pretty ironic. It's been reported that his older brother, Artur Chimaev, moved to Sweden with his wife and children 3 years prior to Khamzat in 2010, again, presumably based on political asylum, which, no matter which way you slice the situation, seems to be the most likely way that the Chimaevs ended up in Sweden. This caused a little bit of controversy because Chimaev very openly supports the Chechen president Ramzan Kadyrov, which puts his alleged asylum status into question since it presumably hinges on him escaping Kadyrov's regime. And that was exactly what Khabib's cousin Khabib Nurmagomedov alluded to in an Instagram post in May of 2021, writing the following: "After moving to Sweden and writing a complaint against your own Chechen Republic that you are being infringed upon, you received documents for a good life in Sweden." This was in response to Ramzan Kadyrov calling Khabib a UFC project in an Instagram live, saying that he would pay him any money to fight in his own promotion called Ahmat, with Khamzat commenting that they would rip him apart if he wants it. The situation quickly resolved itself, with both sides essentially agreeing to disagree and writing it off as a simple misunderstanding, but I'd like to delve a little bit deeper if you guys don't mind, just so you can get a little context as to why it occurred in the first place. Like I mentioned, Kadyrov has his own MMA organization called Ahmat. It even has its own slogan, and if you've ever went into the rabbit hole of Russian MMA, you may have heard it, Ahmat Sila, translated to Ahmat Power. It even has its own rap song by an extremely popular Russian rapper named Timothy. What I'm trying to say is, it's on the map. There are several high-level MMA fighters and even a couple of boxers that have fought in it or were honorary guests at one point or another, Khabib included. Lately, however, it hasn't been too popular a destination due to the sanctions placed on it in December of 2020 for suspected human rights violations by Kadyrov. There are a lot of accusations in general thrown his way, and I'll leave that out of this video because it's not relevant and the situation in Chechnya is pretty complex. Kadyrov has plenty of detractors, but he has a lot of supporters as well. Anyway, it's been theorized that because of the sanctions placed on his MMA promotion, Kadyrov is taking the strategy of attracting the biggest names possible and having them fight for him for any amount of money, thereby putting Ahmat back into the spotlight. Supposedly, that's what he attempted to do by calling out Khabib on Instagram Live and using Khamzat as the fighter that he was going to pit against him on behalf of Ahmat by having him leave a comment at a really convenient time. Ultimately, the plan backfired as Khabib ignored the challenge, and the public almost unanimously took his side. Both Kadyrov and Chimaev ended up downplaying the situation in follow-up statements. Khamzat's friendship with Kadyrov has drawn criticism from several members of the media, notably a Chechen blogger named Khamzat Abdurrahmanov, who is also living in Sweden under refugee status after surviving an attempt on his life, according to him, courtesy of Kadyrov's regime. Khamzat took offense to Khamzat comparing himself to Muhammad Ali, claiming that Ali bravely went against an oppressive regime at the risk of his own safety and freedom, while Chimaev conformed to it despite not having to. Truth be told, Kadyrov might have saved Khamzat's life, or at the very least his career. If you recall, earlier this year Chimaev had a particularly nasty bout with COVID. As a matter of fact, it got so bad that he was reportedly worried that he was going to die and seemingly retired. And then he just kind of got over it. Well, it wasn't quite that simple. See, after hearing about Khamzat's plans for retirement, Kadyrov summoned him to Chechnya and provided him with the best possible treatment. Khamzat actually ended up going through an unspecified surgery on his throat. You can see the scar here. And judging by his performance at UFC 267, the guy is as good as new. I'll leave the question of whether or not Kadyrov helped him out of the goodness of his heart or with an ulterior motive up to you guys. Speaking of UFC 267, in a puzzling twist, Kadyrov did not publicly congratulate Khamzat with his victory, and if you go to what's alleged to be his official Instagram, Khamzat does not follow him. There could be a couple of reasons for this. Maybe Kadyrov is offended at the lack of Ahmat representation by Chimaev within the UFC, or maybe he's deciding to publicly distance himself due to the growing criticism Khamzat has been receiving for their friendship in the media. Or maybe it has to do with the whole asylum thing. After all, his residence in Sweden hasn't been without problems. According to him, he got in trouble with the law after beating up 2 drug dealers who flipped him off on the street, and he also beat down a former friend of his who pulled out a knife after a disagreement. Then there was the story of him attempting to hunt down Conor McGregor in Dublin before his fight with Khabib in 2018. Apparently, he made it to Ireland, but was detained by military personnel and sent back to Sweden. It's not clear why he was detained, but considering that he wasn't known at the time, one would assume it would have something to do with his criminal record. Generally speaking, for all the comparisons that Khamzat receives to Khabib, he seems to have a bit of a different approach to life. Take a look at this picture, for example. Look at Khamzat's hat. Now, to you and I, a pot leaf might not seem like the biggest deal in the world, but I simply can't imagine Khabib wearing something like that. He seems way too conservative in his beliefs for any type of mind-altering substances. I'm not saying he's worse or better, the two are just different. Khamzat is an amazing fighter in his own right and potentially a future champion, maybe even in several different weight classes. There's a lot to learn about him in the octagon still, and even more outside of it, and so these next few years will be very interesting. I want to thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts down below, and as always, I will see you soon.